Okay, fair enough. And here we are.
Live, and you're trying to write things. Oh,
I am.
My goodness.
All right.
See how unprepared you are?
Oh, that's the way it is. See? So I don't get graded, so it's okay.
That's all right. So, hey, guess what? We're here without Leroy Hill.
Oh,
Off
man.
the cuff,
Woo-hoo.
ready to go. 2 weeks in a row, we had no work rocker. Now we have no Leroy Hill.
Is it even worth having?
Have you seen his? He gave you a pretty hard time for not being here. So you can say anything you want now. It seems all
It's
fair.
open season, isn't it?
It's open season. That's
Like
pretty much
it
what
would
he
have
took
changed anything if it was nice.
Yeah, well, probably not. Which is why it's probably mean to you.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
no, we love Leroy, and we give him a lot of grace. He's one of those people that needs a lot of grace. So.
What is it? EGR people, extra grace required people.
Yeah.
That used to be the joke for people. So that was oh, okay. Well, so we got an interesting things I wanted to bring up eventually to talk about. Some crazy stuff going on with the way China's tracking, giving you social media status, like actual status based on social feedback.
Really?
And it can determine some of your rights within it.
Wow.
And how that connects to some other issues of cultural exchange and how we
There's
how
a
we
Netflix
interpret.
program that does something like that.
There's another one. Yeah, so it's interesting. There's some other stuff. Yeah, so we'll go into that. That's some interesting between what's happening in the reality of social media, how it's going to be used with them, and how some TV shows have done it, and it's some interesting. So there's some challenges ahead for that,
Oh, man.
for sure. But before we get to that, I think you got some funny stories for us.
We have a couple. Well, I'm not sure how funny. Well, I have a couple things.
Entertaining.
They should be entertaining.
As is the entire show.
Yeah, well, of course, right. Well, there's a couple things here. First, one of the less entertaining, but here, did you know that Jesus was? When you think of Jesus, what comes to mind for you? Jesus Christ,
Superstar.
We'll get Jesus, our Lord,
Carpenter, Savior, born in Nazareth, died on a cross, raised from the dead.
raised from the dead.
All those sort of things.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, not for this professor.
Oh,
Who-
I think I know the story.
This professor at a Catholic college, he's making some claims about Jesus Christ, and that he was a quote drag king with queer desires.
I heard about
This is not the Jesus I've read in
He
Scripture.
was a transsexual as well, I believe the author argues.
Why corrupt only yourself and only society when you can corrupt the King of Kings himself, right?
Oh.
This is Dr. Tatsyong Benny Liu. I may or may not be.
Excellent pronunciation.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure.
You know what? And even if he says it's wrong, he's wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm
You're
right.
right.
Yeah. New Testament studies at the College of the Holy, Not So Holy Cross, College of the Holy Cross, Worcester, Massachusetts. He said that Jesus was a drag king who had queer desires, and the Last Supper was a literary striptease.
Yes, and I read some details about it. He talks about how Jesus, because he took off his thing to wash feet or something like that. Or
Yes.
the striptease, and he's transgender. I think he talks about in there, right? Because if he had, male, he talks about male female chromosomes. Because if he only had the chromosomes from his mother,
Right.
and the Holy Spirit, that he had no male chromosomes. So how did he become male? Except he became transgender.
It had to be trained. Well, of course.
That's his
That makes
argument.
right.
Oh, it's science.
exa-
It's just basic science.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
It just or lack thereof. It's just incredible
And
at
that's
the
what
depravity.
passes as education.
Yes, and
Yes.
it passes as education.
Ah.
Apparently, I don't know if he's still there now.
In our institutions of Christian education,
Mhm.
we've lost hope that they can even safeguard basic doctrine of the faith.
Yeah, the king, and
Ugh.
we the conservatives are held up as being too mentally stifled,
Yes.
right?
We're not creative
And-
enough.
Right, and
Just,
so
close-minded.
apparently some people are.
Lee.
Well, they're really out there on the immoral end. Well, on
What
a
else
step
is there?
up.
Oh, there's
No.
he
A
goes
step-
up from there.
Oh yeah, here's a step up though. I have 3 things I wanted to bring up real quick.
Up
One-
as in like worse, or up as in like not coming back away from
not quite as
heresy.
bad.
Oh, okay.
Not quite as bad. So it's a step up. American patriotism and Christian worship.
Okay.
I wish Leroy was here, because there's this site that published this. What was it?
Is that Charisma?
The Witness BCC, which is, where's that? Jarvis Williams.
I've seen similar articles. I haven't read any of them, to be honest.
Right.
But I've seen them when Charisma had some about like merging patriotism with faith and the dangers. Is it
Danger?
is that what
Yes,
it's
the
like?
dangers
Is
of
it along those
a particular
lines?
group. This thing, it printed oddly. Oh my gosh.
Mm.
So, but
Good
basically,
preparation there, Dr. Cracker.
well, look at this. Look how it printed.
Oh yeah,
Oh.
that's crazy.
Yeah. So anyway, I still don't have say over the printer. But God wants our worship. He wants us to love Him and beyond anything else, and wants our worship.
Okay.
Sounds pretty good.
Okay.
Are we good with that?
Sure. That
Oh,
sounds
okay.
fine.
So because of that, you cannot. We should not celebrate America's independence
Yes.
because that
I've
violates
seen
this.
similar things. Anybody who is to be patriotic
Right.
is idolatry. To
Yes.
salute the flag.
The celebration
What is that religious
of-
group that
Well, the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Jehovah's Witnesses? Yeah, no birthdays, no, because that's
Right.
all idolatry.
Yeah.
So basically, it's
exactly.
Jehovah's Witness doctrine, and now in evangelicalism.
Right. The honoring of and the worship of America has no place in any gospel-believing church. So
I like
if
how he
you-
equivocates those terms: the honoring of and the
Yes.
worship of.
Yeah.
Honor
So-
is the same as worship.
The only one we can honor is the Lord, right?
Even though Paul in Romans says, honor the authorities,
honor the authorities above you, and also an elder of a church who teaches
is worthy of honor.
double honor.
Double honor, yeah.
Not just double.
That's all about cash money, homie.
Oh, there you. So then they go and they use some scriptures that say, "Hey, we need to worship the Lord," but it says nothing about this. Is poor exegesis. This is poor.
Well, you know what this
exegesis.
is? It's that's sort of what they talk about in circles like the Trump derangement syndrome. There's people always that have thought this. It's becoming popular now in many circles to embrace what many people have argued now because they assume that if you celebrate freedom, you endorse Trump. It's
Right.
America's I am thankful for the freedom of America. Oh, well, must be because you love Trump and it's just there's an insanity level here that's
There
like
is.
anything. If you say anything positive about America, it's because you fully support anything Trump has ever done in his entire life.
Or and anything that other people have negatively attached to Trump, even if that's not true.
Well, yeah, of course.
Right.
Well, it makes sense.
And all of that as well. And this is
Oh.
for Christians in particular, and this is disconcerting to us as educators, is the simplistic thinking that goes into this that does not warrant, acceptance by a Christian. It does not warrant praise. It is not biblically accurate or sound.
Yeah.
It's really poor because we can show respect and honor to those who have done things for us without worshiping them. It's not the same thing, but they equivocate on these concepts. It's much easier to have a boogeyman to hate
Yes.
and to go after in an simplistic way and to be able to promote Christ and make that false dichotomy.
That's what we've talked about, that virtue signaling. You
Right.
have to show that you're so
Right.
virtuous by condemning
Right.
something. So even something that is innocuous and potentially even positive, but because you associate it with something that's negative, therefore,
Right.
it's complete non sequitur.
Now, here's an interesting one.
Okay.
This is something happened to this Canadian clarinetist.
A clarinetist?
A clarinetist. The guy played.
That's a terrible word. I like flautist better.
Oh, well,
A flute player is a flautist.
that's right.
That's a much better than clarinetist.
Well, he doesn't play the flute,
I know.
so
well,
it wouldn't really.
I know, but it's a worse name. Flautist is a much better thing than clarinetist.
Well, this guy Eric.
For that reason alone,
Abramovitz-
I despise him.
Okay.
I
ahead.
despise him.
He's an award-winning Canadian clarinetist,
Not good enough to be a flautist.
but he sued his former girlfriend.
His former girlfriend.
He actually put in for a prestigious position scholarship where this person, this gentleman from a competitive scholarship at Colburn Conservatory of Music in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Now,
so he wanted a scholarship from this conservatory.
Because the guy who he wanted to study under, this Yehuda
You
Gilad.
shouldn't say names. Clearly,
Yeah.
you should not even be pronouncing
No kidding.
any names.
This Mr. Gilad gentleman only accepts 2 students a year to study under him.
Gilad, there's a guy that used to do a workout routine. Gilad would do worships at Hawaii on the beach. I used to see
Is that
when I was
right?
a kid. Yeah, it was Gilad. Yeah,
Well, that's really cool.
body fitness with Gilad.
Yeah, did he play the flute?
I
Was he a
don't know.
flutist?
But he was a clarinetist, maybe. I don't
Maybe
know.
he was clarinet.
Maybe that was
okay.
bodybuilding. He was, maybe he's the same guy. I don't know.
Well, this guy Eric, he was accepted.
Okay.
His girlfriend found the email and sent back saying, "Never mind."
Oh.
Yes.
That might be.
He spent hours practicing, and he's like, "I think I've nailed it. I got it." He applied, and he learned.
Oh, that's harsh.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was going to be like him being nuts, but he's totally legit in this.
Yes. No.
So she totally, and then this guy meanwhile accepted somebody else, so he's out.
So what happened? Well, here's what happened. It was in 2014. A few weeks later, he learned that he was 7 he was not accepted. Okay. And so he went and did his education somewhere else. He tried once again to enter the program in 2016, and that's when he learned, "What are you talking about? You rejected me." The Gilad said, "You rejected me." He goes, "What are you talking about?" And that's how he found out. His girlfriend went in and pulled one over on him, his ex-girlfriend.
Oh my gosh.
He is suing her for almost $300,000.
Oh my gosh.
So
That's crazy.
In the electronic age,
I have a solution for this, though.
what's the solution?
This is actually leading to the main story I just brought up to begin
Oh,
with.
is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Here's clearly
see,
the solution.
This is why I had that story.
See, there's a problem.
This is my segue.
You didn't even know this.
And
This is clearly the only solution.
The only solution.
The best solution.
The China solution.
The China solution.
Okay.
The communist China solution.
I like that.
Okay. So
we have this problem
we have a problem.
And
She used social media,
media.
internet technology to do
Right.
something bad.
to undermine.
We
it.
agree that was bad.
Mm-hmm.
That was bad.
That
Naughty
was
girl.
bad.
Bad.
Well, now, why was it bad? If it's just if morality is relative,
Which is another issue we could bring up about relative morality, but that's another issue.
yes.
Which we may get into, actually.
But isn't
with
it
another story.
amazing? She undermined him. Oh, for the prestigious award.
Oh.
I mean, it's only 2 people get accepted by this guy, and she
That's so
undermined.
painful.
Oh,
That's so painful.
That's incredible.
Serious damage.
oh, that's really
So-
big.
Here's the thing. This is called Inside China's Vast New Experiment in Social Ranking.
So
here's the deal. I'll read a few little select pieces. So basically, there's a guy whose name is Lazarus Liu. And I said that properly. 'Cause
well, that's really good.
I
That's,
speak
that's,
some
not-
Mandarin,
that's
so
hardly
you
even.
know.
That's hardly
Lazarus
even a
Liu.
hard one.
I know. Well, he changed his name to Lazarus.
Oh,
when
okay.
he moved, came to
In
America.
order
he
to
changed
help
it,
you
yeah.
out, so you'll be able to
Yeah.
pronounce it.
So in 2015, he had studied here in UK.
Right.
Moved back to China in 2015. And it says as he quickly noticed something had changed. Everyone paid for everything with their phones. At McDonald's, the convenience stores, even the more mom and pop restaurants, his friends in Shanghai used mobile payments. So to get this all pay ID, which is what they used, it's a private, quote unquote, company. You know.
Yeah, their version of private.
Yeah, it's a
Big
communist
Daddy.
country, so it's
Right.
more fascist probably than
Right.
private. But anyway, so this all pay ID, Liu had to enter his cell phone number and scan his national ID card.
Right.
Because in China, you get a national ID card.
Right.
He says with just a few clicks, he was in. All pay slogan summed up the experience. Trust makes it simple.
Oh.
So the story goes on.
Trust.
Yeah. So the story goes on, just explains how he signed up for this and it's used all over the place. Well, that's one thing. Now it's sort of...
So this is actually going on.
Yeah, this has been going on for you. I mean, you've been able to pay, like, you can get a Coke out of a Coke machine.
Right.
You hold up your phone and do it.
Right.
The U.S. has been way behind that sort of level of use of cell phone technology for a long time. So they want to make a connection here. So they give a little bit of history in this article. So basically they go on, back in 1956 in the United States, you had the guy named Bill Fair and Earl Isaac. Now, you don't know who those guys are, but they were engineers. They created a company called Fair, Isaac & Co., which you know as FICO. Your FICO score.
Yeah, it's FICO score.
So that's, it's basically to evaluate. They wanted this statistical analysis of how you could translate people's purchasing trends, financial things, into a financial history. And that's how you get your FICO score
Right.
from this company in 1956. Well, China has never had anything like that because they're not a free market, so it didn't really matter. So, but now you look at this, what they've done through this all pay system, and then the integration of, the lack of any kind of evaluating where people are. And they said, well, here, there's a need in this market. So in 2013, Ant Financial, which is the name of this company, excavations, they went to a mountain retreat, and they tried to discuss how could we sort of fill in this gap in the market. They had a product, and one of them is called Zima Credit. Zima, which is Chinese, means sesame, as in open sesame.
Oh, okay.
Right. Open. So we're the product that opens doors is actually why they called it that.
Okay.
So that's this idea.
Zima.
So the executives realized that they could use the data collecting powers of Allpay to calculate a credit score based on individuals' activities. Okay, well that seems like FICO. You get your FICO score. Whatever it's called. Right. But it says this. But they began to process of creating a score that would credit for everything in your life that explains who you are. So you would use data to measure people's worth, is how this is. So not just your credit value, it's actually data that measures your worth.
No, you're
in the society.
Your individual value.
Yes. This is where it goes a little Orwellian. So in 2014, the Chinese government announced it was developing what it called a system of social credit. It's good. So they rate the reputations of individuals, businesses, and even government officials, searchable by fingerprints or biometric characteristics. So what does that mean? They say for the Chinese Communist Party, social credit is an attempt, this is what the author says, at a softer, more invisible authoritarianism. The goal is to nudge people towards behaviors ranging from energy conservation to obedience to the party. That is the capital P, the Chinese Communist Party. The government wants to preempt instability that might threaten the party. So Zima Credit, here's what they do. It tracks your behavior in an app to arrive at a score between 350 and 950 and offers perks and rewards to those with good scores. It considers not only what you repay your bills, but also what you buy, what degrees you hold, and the scores of your friends. So you get ranked by who you're friends with. So if you're friends with people that have higher rankings,
like I said, Netflix.
Yeah,
you said show.
There's a TV show about this. Actually, there's one that I've seen, and I'll jump in here real quick. This is called The Orville. I don't know if you've seen this.
No.
So it's a TV show. It's new. It's sort of like a comedy spoof on the Star Trek series.
Okay.
All those Star Trek shows.
Okay.
And like the Naked Gun would be the spoof on the action-y show.
Right.
Airplane back in the 70s was
all the airplane shows.
Yeah, there were spoofs on those things. That's sort of the Orville is.
Yeah.
But they had a season in season 1, episode 7, called Majority Rule. And in this, and I have to think that they know this, whoever wrote this knew what was going on in China. But it's interesting because basically they're up in space and they travel to another planet, the same as every Star Trek episode, and do they interfere with the culture? They don't know it and that kind of thing. So, but what's interesting in this, there's one point where this guy, he's just act like an idiot, and he does this like bumping and grinding dance on a statue. It turns out to be the statue of this great leader of the people, and so he gets
This is a great
arrested.
offense.
Yeah,
right,
that's a great offense.
Right.
But there's another offense that's really interesting. One of the ladies, her name is Alara on the ship. She's wearing a hat that is guy because she's an alien. She has alien features, so she's wearing this hat. But this hat is only for a certain ethnic group on the planet. So she gets essentially accused of cultural appropriation for wearing this hat that she has no right to wear because that belongs to this other ethnic group. And so what they do on this TV show is they have people, like you literally are walking around with your cell phones and you have like scan buttons on you and this phones can scan. So like if you say, oh, hi, have a nice day, you can scan them and give them a thumbs up.
Right.
And if somebody bumps into you and makes you spill your coffee, boom, you scan them and thumbs down.
Right.
And you do this social media ranking of your score, of how the culture, and if your score gets too low, they put you on like you get like you can't buy stuff, you can't get access to things. And if you commit crimes, then they have this thing where you go on like a Jerry Springer type show
Right.
and you make a defense for yourself and people vote at the end. And if they vote you down, they kill you.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So that's what this show's about.
Right.
But it's not far from what's happening in China.
Right. Oh,
This
wow.
guy, this poor Canadian dude, that
Right.
this would be how they solve this problem. So the state council in China, now back to this, says this, that under the national social credit system, people will be penalized for crime of spreading online rumors, fake news. If you retweet that fake news, you will lose social.
Can we get
credit.
some CNN and MSNBC people live over there in China?
Yeah, but the problem is and you brought up earlier, who judges what is
determines
untrustworthy?
Right, exactly.
And they said other offenses might include anything deemed seriously untrustworthy. Of course, in this case, by the Communist
Party.
Party.
This is vague phrasing. It's
Yeah.
always vague phrasing.
Now, this is a quote from a company executive
A company of
this ant company that
the Chinese
the Chinese company,
Okay.
but they're working
Right.
with the state. They're saying now it's independent of the state.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah. Oh, it's voluntary. You don't have to do it.
Right. Yeah.
But this is what the company
Kill you if you
spokesman
don't.
said. Chief executive, who was quoted as saying in Ant Financial, Zima Credit, which is again the Open Sesame Credit, says, this Zima Credit will ensure that bad people in society don't have a place to go, while good people can move freely and without obstruction.
Good defined.
So
as,
literally,
Mhm.
they have this thing. It determines like if you can get hotel reservations or not. This guy who's telling his story had all these circumstances that came up where like you can get you could upgrade to a luxury suite, but if you have bad credit, you literally you have to go on the slower trains. You can't get on the faster trains. You have to take more inconvenient forms of transportation. You can't get the nicer forms of transportation. You lose the ability to access nice restaurants.
That includes the people you hang out with, which will discourage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's actually what happened on the show.
That's class. That's
so,
class,
like, if
yeah.
you are connected
That's
with
segregation.
somebody
Right.
who, like, WordCrock, you have a low rating because you got, I
Well, I'm next to you.
unfriend you. Well, I would unfriend you because you're hurting my rating.
Well, no, that's not. No,
Yeah,
no.
exactly. Theoretically.
No, okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
real.
really stretching it, Joe.
Yeah.
So
this is for
I
China.
I could see him friending Leroy and Corey.
Well, yeah. There you go. Poof. Defriending.
Sky's the limit.
Especially Corey Marsh.
Well, of course.
Defriend him. Because it would pull down my social cred. It still does, but it's just not a way of ranking it these days. But now there is. So it says this, to understand the allure that social engineering holds for the Chinese leaders, communist leaders. I think this is important for us to realize in our own context. This idea of social ranking, we're now like virtue signaling and shaming. I mean, I saw the story yesterday. Maybe you saw like a guy who had some kid who was wearing a Make America Great hat, some teenage kid.
Right.
He went up and yanked his head off, threw a Coke in his face, whatever.
Right.
People getting kicked out of restaurants because
Yep.
they worked for the administration.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is a way for the government, what China's doing, is to control that through an app.
Really, to do
Literally,
the same thing.
when you go to pay, it's,
Right.
oh no, you can't come in here because you don't have a
Right.
high enough rating
Right.
within their app. But as a communist nation, their desire goes back decades, long before apps and big data. In the years after the 1949 Communist Revolution, the government assigned everyone to local work units, which became the focus of surveillance and control. So you're assigned a unit, and everyone in that, you're watching each other, and you report to the communist government your actions. Oh, did he have a wrong thought? Does he need to get sent to a place to re-education camp?
Yeah.
Does he? So this is through social media and technology ways to
Much quicker, much easier, faster.
deem somebody untrustworthy that you can then have them removed from places in society. You can even now people are blacklisted. If you had an offense or went to jail, you can't access certain things, and your score, your social credit score goes down. I saw this, and it's just quite disturbing, the whole process.
Oh, it should be. I can see suicide rates going up because of that.
Yeah.
Because the outcasts, like, Uncle Joe, he did this. Well, now we have to unfriend him because it'll affect me. I can't talk to you. That type of thing.
Yeah, think about this differences. See, in that case in Canada you brought up, he has a recourse through the court systems.
Right. Mm-hmm.
He has a grievance. The court. There's a law. Mm-hmm. There's adjudication of the law, and there's a verdict based on that. This is purely social engineering. Oh, well, I saw that guy throw a piece of litter. Well, instead of saying, "Hey, pick that up," you just downgrade them on your phone. You scan them and downgrade them. You give them negative marks, and now they can't eat at a restaurant, or they can't get good, or they have to pay more for services.
And if you're going to do that to somebody and they don't want that done, what are they going to do to you? They're going to kill you.
Yeah, I mean,
because now your value is at stake.
Yeah.
The murder rate. I mean, go ahead.
Because it's not just determining right or wrong; it's determining your worth
your value,
to society.
Exactly. Which now ranks the highest.
Because there is no inherent worth. There is no human dignity. Mm-hmm. There is no human sacredness.
So I can kill you to preserve my integrity, my worth.
Yeah, and there is a Netflix thing. I think I remember now seeing a show about it. I don't remember it, but I remember watching it.
It was really interesting. They had this this episode where you get ranked by people who like you, your job, and stuff like that. And people you hang out with who are above you can bring your rank up.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, it determined the kind of job you could get.
Yes.
And, who you could hang out, who wanted to hang out with you, socialization.
It was you didn't get invited to the right parties.
Exactly.
You have to be begging. Well,
someone could say, someone could downgrade you right there. If you snapped at somebody customer service, bam, do this, but your points get lost.
Yeah.
So you have to work your way back up.
And in that show, as I remember, they even had people who be consultants to help you basically as PR rep,
Right, yes.
In today's process, to be a PR rep.
Right.
Oh, here's the things you do to increase your... That's exactly what the Zima thing does. This guy talks about how he went to a park where there was somebody who had a really high, like a 710 score, and she was giving him advice on what you have to do. And really what it is find people with a high score that will friend you. If you have low score people, defriend them. And I remember, that Netflix one where there's a girl that she grew up and they were friends forever, but she had to defriend one and friend somebody else because it was all about a popularity thing. And you literally, and in China they're talking about you can't access social services. Certain services could be revoked from your access. Oh, so you get, instead of $1,000 a month paid by the state for your state salary, you can only get $750 now because your score went lower.
Right.
See, people don't realize. I mean, in California, we're experimenting here with this city. You heard about this? In California, this guy has had this. There's a little thing. They're inviting people. They're going to live there for a year, and they're going to pay them a base human living wage. They don't have to do anything for it. They just pay them.
All right.
And then they're going to just see how this goes. And if it works, it's a pilot program for the state, which others have proposed in the United States as a minimum. Because you are alive, you get a minimum base living salary.
Wow. Okay.
The problem is, once the government starts to do that, then how do they value, you get into systems like this of social ranking, they also then have the power to remove that from you if you don't enforce the party line.
Right.
And so we think, oh, it's America. This is what these communist
It's about manipulation. And you use vague terms, positive terms.
Yeah.
Those people who are good, valuable, trust, they use all these terms and you'll fill it in with positive what you think.
Yeah.
Man, and this is bad.
Yeah, Doug mentioned, the old sci-fi, I think that was from the 80s, maybe Doug, you remember 70s, Gattaca? Remember Gattaca? I remember
that's a long time ago. Was that
but they did it based on genetic purity.
Right, and they were going to send some guy off and...
Yeah, I remember. That's a long
one guy
ago.
had broken, was crippled, and so he used his DNA with another guy.
Yeah.
But at leg extension, his brother was a cop trying to hunt him down. Was that the one?
I think that's the one, But it's the same basic premise. But this is now on social control of like, oh, you said you voted for Trump, oh, you're down. Or you said you voted for Obama, oh, vote up. I mean, whatever those sides are, whatever the society says for the moment is the thing. You need to do that thing. It's very... very difficult. Now, here's the other challenge that comes with this, and you brought this up. Who decides?
Right. Yeah.
So we have to put ourselves in the thing. And all these stories like the one on, the Orville, which is a comedic look at it. Others are more serious, like the Netflix one. This cultural appropriation, or how do one culture judge another culture? We get the same thing. So here's an example.
Yeah.
In Brazil,
Right.
there is this tribe that basically, when they have children born with deformities, or if they're twins, anything, they, by their cultural tradition, because they believe that's a demonic spiritual thing,
right.
they kill them
Right.
by burying them alive.
Right.
So if you are a twin, they'll bury the twins alive.
Yep.
If you have a hurt leg, or if you're whatever, they'll bury you alive and kill you. Well, there's now this problem. So there's a couple things. Let me read a couple little highlights from this. It says, more than a decade ago, Kanhu left the homeland of Kamuraya. That's the Ward Crocker pronunciation.
No. That's your own, man. That's your own. Yeah.
It says, an indigenous tribe with some 600 members on the southern edge of the Brazilian Amazon. She was 7 years old. She never returned. If I had remained there, Kanhu, who had progressive muscular dystrophy, told Brazilian lawmakers last year, I would certainly be dead. That's because her community would likely have killed her, just as for generations that had killed other children born with disabilities. This sort of infanticide has gone on. Targeting include disabled children of single mothers, twins, whom some tribes, including the Kamura, see as bad omens.
See, not so easy, is it?
Yeah, I know, right? Well,
Once
I just
you
want
get
you to
past
feel
Bob
better.
and Frank.
Oh,
No. I know you. There's no sympathy from you.
It's pity. Kanhu's father, Makau, told me of a 12-year-old boy from his father's generation whom the tribe buried alive because he wanted to be a woman. So now we get this conflict between, gay rights people and everything else. There's this whole thing.
See, they're persecuted everywhere.
An evangelical missionary that was there, he spearheaded this media lobbying campaign to end this practice within this tribe. It's the culmination of this controversial bill aimed at eradicating the practice, which won overwhelming approval in 2015, vote by the Chamber of Deputies, the lower house of Brazil's National Congress. It's currently under consideration of the federal Senate, the upper house. But, of course, killing these children and killing gays and killing crippled people, that can't be accepted by some people who are protesting. From the academics and indigenous right groups of the country.
Who are you to say that they're wrong?
To what extent should the state interfere with custom that may seem inhumane from the outside, but that indigenous people developed long ago as a means to ensure group survival in unforgiving environments? See, it's just they've evolved that way. That's the way they've evolved, to deal with unforgiving environments. And who are you to judge them for killing gays or crippled people or twins?
Why doesn't the KKK get the same respect?
It's just a cult. That's how they grew up.
That's how they grew up. That's how
through
they evolved.
Centuries, through decades of their culture just said it was okay.
You can't. Yeah, who are you to say otherwise?
Oh, I know.
Wow.
Well, this is the problem. So it immediately created tensions between those who champion universal human rights, which they have no foundation for. The UN Declaration years ago, it gives no foundation for. It says, we declare there's human rights, but it makes no effort to say what that's based on, because they wanted people to just find their own. They're trying to have a unifying way, so you find your own.
So then there aren't any either way.
But I've listened to recently a bunch of humanists argue that, well, the UN's declared this, and there's this consensus decree that this is true, but this is the problem. There's consensus on no foundation. Mm-hmm. They have no way to counter these people.
And these objectors know that.
Yes,
they know
They know that this exists.
Yeah.
They just pretend it doesn't.
And they know there's no foundation.
Yeah.
So they realize it, and they're playing on that.
Yeah. Well, they just say, well, consensus is our thing, but that's what do you have here? You have an indigenous tribe who now you have to overrule with your consensus.
Right.
But isn't that imposition of your culture on theirs? If it's all based on culture, if there's no overriding metaphysical, ontological, axiological guide, it's all based on culture. Mm-hmm. Well, then there's no basis for one culture to interact or make those judgments with the other one. So this is interesting. It says immediately this ruling or this thing created tension between those who champion universal human rights, which prioritize the individual, which is not necessarily actually true, and those who support cultural relativism, which favors the freedom of communities to organize themselves according to their own moral codes. It's not totally true, because even the universal claims are oftentimes group-based, not individual-based.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, the rights and dignity and sacredness of human is based on a group association.
Sure, because those individuals who get killed probably are not ones that voted for that.
Yeah.
That wasn't their individual choice.
So that summary is not really fair to the actual conflict that goes on between those things. So look at this. Here we go. Academic anthropologist Funai, is this person who's doing this, argues that child killing among indigenous people must be understood in the context of the Amazon's incredibly harsh environment. Something like a misshapen leg can seem like a small thing for us, he says, but it is not simple for them. Surviving in the jungle can provide an insurmountable hurdle for these children, having them in the anthropologist world doomed to failure. But many Brazilians find it unacceptable that the government would allow tribes to kill disabled children in the name of cultural preservation rather than let the state provide them with medical treatment. So they're saying, which is the argument we have today for abortion and other issues. Well, that disability is going to make it hard for them. It's a hardship on the family. It's a hardship. Who are we to judge that they could sustain that? This week, I'll say the name, which I don't do often, but Rachel Held Evans, was mad at that Trump's going to nominate. She's a quote unquote pro-life person, but she's mad that this could overturn Roe v. Wade because, there's poor people that need these abortions because it would be so hard for them in their life to, survive this economic depression of a child that it could cause. And so we can't judge them for that. It's no different.
Right.
Between infanticide and abortion, all these things, and it's no different than the problem that they're facing here that we face in our own country.
Mm-hmm. That's true. It's the same thing, just a different way of getting there. So, isolated group or whatever.
Yeah.
That's
So listen to this. It says a report by the anthropologist Marcos Furas de Almeida, undergirding the public prosecution's injunction, charged the Suzukis, that's the missionary people that had saved this girl.
Right.
Well, they're saying that's wrong. You did a wrong thing.
Based on what? Based on his culture.
Well, they're advocating for Western values to the detriment of those held by the Struwaka people. Okay. By removing Hakani and the Suzukis, quote, stood in the way of the realization of cultural practice filled with meaning. Almeida wrote, bringing her back once she was healthy resulted in a big mistake because they took her back and showed the villagers that you can survive these things and it won't. And the villagers said, hey, it started to change them.
Right.
Well, they're saying that's wrong because you change. It's like the prime directive of Star Trek.
Right.
You're interfering with their cultural progress.
Right. Even though they wanted it.
It really is this sort of Star Trekian sort of thing that they think, oh, we're interfering with their culture. That makes it evil. So he says, bringing her back was with a healthy and a big mistake. That was the introduction to the Struwaka's symbolic universe of a possible resolution to a problem. Well, you changed their worldview. That's terrible.
So no, that's more fundamental, right? Or that's more, to him, it's more a fundamental non-negotiable than the lives of the individuals.
It resolved the problem in a way that wasn't available to them under their control by traditional practices.
Right, but that's still, he has an underlying principle there that's more fundamental than the life of the individuals who are dying.
Exactly.
So that's what now we're getting down to.
The principle of non-cultural interference is more fundamental than human life.
Right.
Because there is no fundamental value to human life.
Exactly.
Which is exactly the Star Trek thing since the 70s. The prime directive. Don't interfere at any cost. You never change the culture.
Right. Although they did all the time.
It was inconsistent.
Right.
Because it wouldn't be entertainment.
You can't have contact with the culture without it being changed.
Now, I show clips from this in my ethics class and talk about where it's convenient they override that prime directive to advance certain moral objectives within the show. Mm-hmm. But when it doesn't advance, when it sort of advances other moral objectives, it's the prime directive. But ultimately, it's still the value of human life there is no inherent value of any life.
Right.
Unless it's convenient to the premise of the show. But because the prime directive in their case, but in this idea of this cultural purity that shouldn't be interfered outside their universe. He says, I love the language. It's crazy.
Well, that's based on his understanding of his cultural view of culture. What would that person say in reference to the Westerner saying, well, based on my culture, I have to do it, and you're not in a position to tell me I'm wrong, because now you have culture pitting culture.
Yeah.
So my culture says I'm right for doing this. I have an obligation to do it based on my culture. Even if you don't like it, I have to do this. And that's the problem with moral relativity. There is no objective standard to go by, and there's no objective referee.
Yeah.
You can't referee that.
Well, the culture is the referee. Which it's a circular thing.
Right, exactly.
I get it, but,
that's what I got to do this.
And Doug brings up, it's the same thing as. No. He brings up the same thing as, like, if you believe, evolutionary survival of the fittest,
right.
and you can't argue against that. And it's funny because I heard a podcast with William Lane Craig the other day. He said, no apologist I've ever heard argues that atheists will say that that there's a moral standard and that there's a moral thing you can hold people to. He's like, no good apologist would ever say that you could, evolution is a moral guide or whatever. And I'm thinking, well, maybe not in the academic literature, but certainly at a populist level, and certainly indirectly in these cases, this is exactly what is being argued, that these people have their own cultural standards that evolved over time, and we can't interfere. So there's no. I think that's very much so being argued.
Yeah, I have to hear what he said. Actually said.
It was it was interesting. But it says elsewhere in the report, Almeida lamented that the Suzukis, again the missionary couple that saved this girl, and then brought her back to show them she was healthy and able to survive, having encouraged the Sawada men to get medical treatment for chronic pain. Oh, how dare they! They encouraged them to get treatment for pain. kept him from resolving the problem the way they originally intended, which was to commit suicide. So they're lamenting the fact that when these men had pain, I got a toothache, it won't go away, whatever. Don't go see a dentist, kill yourself. See, this is how their culture originally intended them to deal with the suffering and pain. How dare you interfere? This is what they're arguing. How dare you keep them from doing it the way they initially intended?
Their logic is, if you change the culture over, the culture does the same thing every time throughout history. Yeah. But our culture progresses, so they don't want their culture to progress, but morally progress
only internally.
But even internally now moral progression is okay, or what they consider moral progression, where we've progressed in our society, where we aren't so old schools to have old Christian ideas that lock you in. Now we've progressed beyond that, and we've developed our morality. We're now free and have a culture where we can endorse abortion at will, almost at will.
Well, I agree.
But you said so. Change within our culture is okay, but change within their culture is not.
I agree. Ultimately, it's logically incoherent.
Right.
But to be fair to what their actual argument is, though, they're saying, no, if they came to that within their own culture, without outside interference, it would be okay if they didn't kill people. Like if they discovered medicine on their own, if they discovered a way internally to them, without religious interference of these missionaries.
But even so, we have discovered or had things that given to us our culture from other cultures. We've gained a lot of knowledge from other cultures.
Like I said, it's logically incoherent.
It's logically incoherent.
But that's how they argue against that. They're saying, no, we're not saying.
But that's just not true for our culture. It's incoherent on every level. It's not just one level. It's on every level. It's bad. People need to recognize this. They need to recognize the idiocy. It is intellectual idiocy of these claims because they sound good on the surface. Once again, they use these generalizations. But it's the details that actually matter.
And how many Christians buy into these not this argument specifically, but the arguments that open them up to, that prepare them. We don't want to interfere with it. That's just their cultural perception, and that's we buy into.
You're prepping somebody.
This non-universal nature of ethics and values and morality and truth, all these things. Oh no, you can't interfere, and so it leads to this path for many believers who just can't find any moral framework that's not completely subjective.
Right.
And this is why the importance of why we do this, why we talk about these things is, and why we encourage people to, you got to share these things around, because a lot of the Christian discussions, yes, there's a lot of apologetics in the world, which is valuable, no doubt about it. But trying to frame these current event issues in these things and learning how to think through them to pick out these things is a crucial life skill that we Christians need, or we're going to find more and more buy into this silliness.
Right.
Because the people that have bought into, redefining sin and all these other issues, they've done it purely based on a cultural relativistic nature. And when it comes to issues like this, at some point, they're going to have no foundation to reject this except for, it's morally offensive at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
But 10 years from now, it's not so morally offensive because enough has been eroded.
Right. Right.
Yeah, this is last quote from this one that I thought was interesting and telling. Because, if I wasn't reading this, somebody say, you're distorting what these people, that's not, you Christians are lying. It's fake news. No one would ever say that.
But here it is.
But here it is, quoted from these people.
Yeah.
It says, in May 2017, Kanhu gave an impassioned speech. That's the young gal that was saved by the missionaries and then came back. Yeah. She gave an impassioned speech during a congressional hearing on disability rights. She said, quote, "When the subject of child killing comes up, there are people who will say, but that's their culture. We have to respect it."
So
which she's right.
She's addressing this
issue. That's
issue.
not a straw man argument on our part.
This is
we have read the quotes
exactly.
from the academic anthropologists who said that very thing.
And people will say that today, even in our culture, we have to respect somebody else's culture, unless, of course, it's the Christian culture, which opposes it. So,
which is why when we hear that phrase, regardless of what the topic is, we have to evaluate it.
Right.
Because that sense assumes all cultures are morally equal.
Correct. And there's no basis to critique another culture. There's no referee. There's no external source.
In naturalism, materialism, we talk about in a lot of our courses that we teach, you and yours and mine, we point out that any of those worldviews that begin with sociopraxy and the element of culture, ethics, and that kind of area ultimately lead to this.
Right.
Because there's no overarching metaphysical truth on which to base the evaluation of culture.
Even ones who posit God, if you overemphasize the ethic and the relativity, God almost becomes irrelevant.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. So
because God becomes a product of the culture, not a source that feeds and directs the culture in those. So you can acknowledge God.
Right. But it doesn't really do any good.
Yeah, the sort of open theism where God is progressing with us would be probably a lead-in to that.
Generic lip service type Christianity where everyone's a Christian if they claim to be Christian. It's just as long as you do good, you're a Christian.
Yes.
So that type of thing.
Which is why
which is a fake
we've
Christianity.
seen this radical shift. We think is so quick. I remember it's like one week, literally, President Obama said, "I support traditional marriage." The next week he says, I support gay marriage. And literally at that moment, opinion polls changed. Now some say that the polls aren't true or whatever, but like within a week, polls and churches shifted their positions on it. You can fake polls, but there are churches that came out and said, yes, we agree with this now. It didn't have, it seemed like a light switch was flipped, but it wasn't.
Right.
That had been brewing in a culturally conditioned Christianity that was culture-based, not based in an overarching metaphysic of God exists and there's a truth outside of that. That had been brewing for decades. Francis Schaeffer observed that problem back in the 80s and the 70s. Others had been observing it for a while within Christianity.
Right.
It's just that it happens under the surface until something changes and all of a sudden it's exposed. And that's what things like this, if we're not careful, we're not far behind this.
No, we're not. Not at all.
She goes on to say again, to just finish her quote. So she doesn't straw man and she said, hey, we respect that. That's what people say. She said, folks, for God's sake, a culture that involves the death of innocent people has to stop. She said, it is sad to think about how we are ignored. You abandon us, you pretend we're invisible, since we're way out there in the middle of the jungle. You pretend that we're nothing and use the culture excuse. I ask you one more time to rethink that. We're here. We're screaming for help. We're screaming for rights. That's how she finishes it. Um,
But of course, her screams have no authority,
yeah,
since the culture has the authority.
exactly. Not the individual, which is
Right.
back to that quote that I said was actually incorrect. The conflict is not between those who assign rights to the individual versus those or to the culture, it's those are saying we've left that as a complete culture. Even amongst Christians, we think it's a group identity. When we find this victim culture, it's the loudest, the most offended, the most upset. The Christians, well, I'm an Asian Christian, I'm a black Christian, I'm a white Christian, and that takes priority
over being Christian.
Over being Christian as a whole,
Right.
but over as even being an individual, which Christian is an individual term. It's not a group term.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we become a part of a group, but it's an individual term. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Yep.
So, and that's what we forget is group identities are not bad within Christian worldview, but they flow from the individual. The individual becomes a Christian applies to the individual, therefore it flows to we are Christians collectively, a part of God's family. We have a family identity,
Right.
but our rights are based on being created in the image of God,
Mm-hmm.
and that sacredness of who we are as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And then that then gives value to the group outside of us, not the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
But Christians have forgotten that because we've said Genesis doesn't matter. It's just a story. It's a myth. So then our foundation, well, we just believe that humans have dignity and rights. And yeah. But then it's group ID. Yeah.
And as they come into that, like you're saying, as they come into that group, they actually bring with them their morality.
Yeah.
And to change the group morality versus identify with a morality that's there, given by God, saying, okay, here's my kingdom. You're coming to my kingdom, my rules, my way, my perspective.
Yes.
And they're undermining it.
Yeah.
So they're thoroughly undermining it.
Yeah, and that's the thread from all these stories. Even the funny story about the guy that the second story you started with. His girlfriend does that social media thing, and
Right.
how do we resolve it? And
Right.
they said, here's the way to resolve it.
Here you go.
China.
Yeah.
We can't envision other ways to solve it. On an individual basis, we have to solve it on a group basis, we feel. Because that's where we think rights come from.
That's where the social justice warrior comes in.
Exactly.
In our culture, anyway.
Yeah.
And they're using that very effectively in some ways.
Yeah.
Negatively.
Public shaming.
And even publicly. Like, for instance, the guy who threw grabbed the mega hat off the guy and threw the cup of Coke in his face. Well, that's going viral.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy is going to be found out, and I would not be surprised.
He got fired from
I was going to say,
job.
I'm not surprised he'd be fired for it. All right, something he did on his own time, his free time. He was not representing his company, but guess what? Social media works.
So that's assault. It's assault. He should have been arrested. Hopefully, he should be arrested. I guess they say the police are looking into it, but it should be. It's a physical assault.
It was.
You took forcibly removed their property, which is theft, and then you threw something at them and struck them with an object, which is assault.
It is. Absolutely.
But for many, it's deemed justifiable because he has the wrong social opinion.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't count.
Yeah.
It doesn't count against him
because that person has no worth in and of themselves.
That's how
you're associated with the wrong group.
Right.
And because you're in the wrong group, I can violate your personhood anyway because your personhood has no rights unless you're in the right group.
Now are we talking about the Jews under the Nazi regime now, or are we talking about here in America? I'm sorry, I'm getting them confused here. Were you?
Yeah, we'll bring in Nazis. Yeah, that's a
So I wasn't sure if we changed eras here. Oh wait,
yeah,
it's the same thinking process.
It is, and that's the challenge we face.
Yeah.
So
those who don't know the past,
are
doomed to
repeat it for sure.
Or if they don't care about the past.
Yeah. And more than that, those who lack awareness about even their present reality and can't think and process through these things. That's the important thing of what I think we're doing through Off the Cuff and even here at our, on the seminary side where our coursework. But having people learn how to think through these things. And it doesn't have to be belligerent or evil. We're not, I hope people...
Well, that's why Leroy's not here.
Yeah. Except to each other. But no. But I mean, I hope people realize, we haven't sought to say the guy who did this, sure, the guy threw the thing, he needs to be held accountable by the law.
Yeah.
But we're not calling for him to be strung up or, people to bludgeon him. I don't even think necessarily he should have lost his job. I think he should be, taken to, jail and charged with something.
Right.
And if that leads to but just doing something inappropriate should not
Right.
mean the loss of somebody's livelihood.
And that's where it's going in our culture.
But that's where we're
big time.
going. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
which is sad. There's some, I think there's too
like
much
Roseanne
drama.
Barr thing, when
Right.
she tweeted what she did, which I agree was a racist.
It was bad. It was wrong. She was wrong.
Seemed pretty racist, and she was
Right.
wrong. Whether it was racist or not, people could argue about what label we put it. It was wrong
Right.
what she did, and I think it was terrible thinking and foolishness and ignorance.
Yeah.
But should she have lost necessarily her job for that? Well, maybe. I don't know. I mean, if she's had, let's look. She's had a history. She got hired because she's a loudmouth and she says dumb stuff, and she's done that since the '80s. Whenever she did her first show, and that's who she
It
is.
shouldn't be shocking that she
That was not shocking that she
Right.
would do that.
Right.
But let's be honest too. The fact that she made that tweet wasn't the reason she was fired.
No, it was image.
It was because she also was conservative and connected with Trump people. Yeah. Therefore, that made that statement.
It magnified it.
It made it worse than it would have been otherwise.
Yeah.
Because
other people who are liberals do things like that and even more.
Oh.
And they don't care. They haven't even addressed those issues.
Yeah, they get ignored.
Harvey Weinstein barely got caught.
Oh yeah. Because he even said in his defense, I know we've mentioned it before, he actually said statements like, "Why are you coming at me with these charges? I support women's right to abortion."
Right.
Like that was his defense to
for
sexual assault.
Right.
For rape and sexual assault. It's, well, I support the right political causes.
Right.
Why are you picking on me?
Because he got caught publicly.
He didn't understand it.
Right. So.
And it's why it was hidden by newspapers for so long too,
because
they knew
he did support the right causes.
And so
they overlooked it.
And Hollywood elites did it too.
That's right. A lot of them, not all of them, but yes, a lot of them.
Well, the ones that didn't got shamed and blacklisted. Because that one gal that was finally heard for years, she tried to bring that to attention, and she got shut down in Hollywood.
Is that right?
Oh yeah.
It's disgusting.
Yeah. Until it became popular to dishonor them. We support this.
Right.
See, that's the problem when these things are culturally relatively based. Women have no... See, it's not even that these people are arguing for women shouldn't be raped. It's that it's culturally inappropriate for them to be raped. Therefore, we defend it. But when the culture was fine, when the Hollywood culture was fine, who was it? What's his name? The director that roofied a young girl when she was 14.
He went over to Switzerland?
Escaped to France or Switzerland or something like that.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Polanski.
Yeah, Roman Polanski.
Yeah.
He's still defending. He received, after he drugged a 14-year-old girl, raped her, which is what Bill Cosby's now gone to jail for. But Bill Cosby also had conservative ideas. He talked about other issues.
That's right.
But Roman Polanski, after that happened, has received from Hollywood awards.
Right.
From Hollywood.
A support.
For his genius.
Right.
And he's still today, even in recent years, has been supported by A-list stars.
That's right.
Who don't care that he did that to the girl.
That's right.
Because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because he was advancing the right moral agenda, social agenda, and he supported the right policies, and his money supported the right causes. Yeah. So it's not even about valuing women for these people. It's just about...
Well, like Hillary Clinton when she defended the rapist of that 12-year-old girl and laughed about knowing he was guilty.
She defended that case.
Right. Yeah, knowing he was guilty, laughing about it.
Yeah.
Women don't care about that. If a guy would have done that?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, and we got to close up, but we won't get into it today, but maybe another time we'll talk about religion and public policy and where that has the place at. But I heard this weekend, one of the people under consideration for the Supreme Court side under Trump is a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And some say that she's an attractive woman. So liberals have been tweeting out, oh, well, you know how Trump likes attractive people. She's a shoo-in to get it because she's... So they've dismissed her qualifications because of who they think Trump is. They're not evaluating her based on her own standards. So I've heard no feminist group decry that she's a mother, she's a working mother.
She's a mother of 7.
Well, see, there's a problem too. She has too many kids for them, but
mother,
but she's a mother, she's a working woman, she has a high degree of education.
Right.
She's accomplished in her field, and people are attacking her on the left because she's a woman.
Right.
And saying that is a negative thing. But I've not seen, National Organization of Women defend her against
They will
those
never
attacks.
do that.
Because again, her value as a woman is
They're moral
not
cowards.
individually
They won't
based. it's group based.
Yes, right.
And if she's outside the right group of women,
Yeah.
she loses her value.
Right.
That's
Right.
a significant problem that we need
Yep.
to, is a theme for all these
Yeah.
cases. So, all right. Well, I hope everyone, that listens and goes through this will be able to learn and apply this stuff to all these other issues that we see, because that's really, hopefully,
It's where things are going.
Yes.
It's where things are going.
And if Christians aren't able to put draw a line in the sand, so to speak, and drop anchor for ourselves as a more against the culture, we are going to face troubles as believers.
We will, and we need to teach our kids how not to fall victim to this.
Which you do with the family apologies.
Fall prey, be victimized
Yeah.
by the culture and the manipulation that's out there. It's
Yeah.
just, it's peer pressure on steroids.
Yeah, and that's something we could also talk about too. Is how do we raise our kids, which I
Right.
know is a passion of yours, and some of the family apologia stuff that we've done in our own church, and we continue to do with helping parents learn how to raise kids with eyes to see.
Right.
Because we can't shelter them from this stuff.
Right. And I know you work with your sons so much on this.
Yeah.
And with your more
Taco Tuesdays we do.
Right.
And,
right. To be able to do that.
Discussion of all these topics. With
And
the
bring
kids.
it up. Be on the cutting edge. Be on the take the lead on the issue.
Yeah.
Be proactive is what I'm looking for. Absolutely proactive on all of it.
Yeah.
So that's
So
awesome.
anyway, so if you guys listening, anybody, if you have ideas, whatever, for our stories that we need to look at that we haven't, topics we haven't covered, you can go ahead and check out our site. Right now we have sort of a landing page focused on, it's morethancake.org/off the cuff. There's actually a little email box on there. You can submit directly to myself or to Ward or Leroy, who's not here, and just ideas, whatever you want, or make comments. All these things are posted on the site as well. You can make comments in the discussion threads. That all these get their own little post as well on the More Than Cake site, morethancake.org site, and people can, you can continue the discussions there. Glad to hear feedback and input. So otherwise, we should be around next Wednesday. I think you're gone though, right?
I'm gone the next couple weeks.
Yeah. So we're looking at a new format for when you might be gone.
All right.
We might have some special guests.
Yes, that'd be awesome. That'd
Join
be
us
awesome.
in this room.
Yep, right here.
Fun. So
Excellent.
we'll see everyone next Wednesday at 2:00.
God bless. Jesus reigns.